In this video, I craft a miniature sci-fi desert house using plaster, cardboard packaging, and some salvaged plastic bits. I finally did it. I crafted a piece of miniature terrain that I had been wanting to make for a long time. I made this, a miniature desert sci-fi house, but not just any miniature desert sci-fi house. You may recognize this building for its striking resemblance to the houses in a certain classic sci-fi space opera epic space opera classic sci-fi. You guessed it. It looks like something from Space Feuds by Borge Snukas. Specifically, episode 4, a soup pope. Oh shoot. Sorry. Star Wars. It looks like something from Star Wars, not Space Feuds. I get the two franchises mixed up all the time. Back to the point. This looks like something from Star Wars, but it is not what the model looks like or does not look like that is important to me, but rather the way it was created. I got the idea for this project from a video I saw a few years ago where someone filled a piece of molded packaging material with plaster and then decorated and painted the resulting plaster shape to make it into a futuristic house/bunker. I saw that video and immediately thought, I have to try that. But I was just getting into the hobby, so I put the project off. Now I have a little experience crafting with plaster and a suitable packaging material, but then I went to search for the video and it's nowhere to be found. It's gone. You know, I probably wouldn't have lost the video if I had liked and subscribed. What I can remember is that plaster was poured into a cardboard packaging as a mold. I think the building was painted red. It's not much to go off of, but it was enough to get me started on the project, so I got crafting. I was very picky about the packaging material I would use as a mold. It could not be too big, and it had to have an interesting, but not too crazy shape. I settled on this. It is a molded pulp tray designed to hold 6 glass jars. Pulp as in paper pulp, and molded as in molded into my own image. The shape of this packing tray is what caught my interest. It has cylindrical spaces where the jars would sit, with some shallower legs between. I really liked the wagon wheel shape on the bottom. I thought that would make for some cool negative space on the architecture of the model. One thing missing from this mold was a doorway. I thought a round doorway would go well with this cylindrical shape, so I cut out a circle from one side, inserted the bottom of a cylindrical plastic bottle, and sealed it in with hot glue. This will create a recessed doorway when I pour the plaster. There were a few holes in the sides of the tray that needed to be sealed so plaster would not leak out all over my table. I didn't want that. I made quick work out of sealing those with hot glue and paperboard. With the edges of the mold sealed, it was time for the plaster. I used good old plaster of Paris to make the structure itself. I added some black ink to the water before mixing the plaster. This turns the plaster gray, which looks a little more subtle in the event that the model is damaged and the plaster chips. I would rather see a gray gouge than a bright white divot. It would actually be better to color the plaster closer to how that feature of the model is going to be painted, but at this stage I did not know exactly what color scheme I was going to go for, so gray seemed like a just overall good choice. After a thorough mix, I poured the plaster into the mold. It has the consistency of yogurt, which is funny considering I reused a yogurt container as a mixing cup for this plaster. Don't eat that! That's not yogurt, that's plaster! My favorite flavor, gypsum! Rest in peace, Gilbert Gottfried. No one will ever forget that voice. no matter how hard they try. I agitated the mold to help the plaster spread out. A few hours later, it was ready to be removed. The first step to demolding was to remove the bottle from the doorway. The moisture in the plaster seemed to get absorbed into the cardboard, making it soft and pliable. This was helpful for ripping out the bottle, but made the rest of the process so messy. I could have waited until the paper was fully dry before demolding, but I really wanted to move this project along, so I just ripped it apart. Two. A skin of paper pulp was left behind on the plaster, which was time-consuming to remove. I resorted to scrubbing it with a wet toothbrush. That worked. It still took a long time, though. The plaster shrunk while it set, and that caused the underside to take on a concave shape. That needed to be flattened so there would be more surface area for the glue when I attached it to a base. This coarse concrete brick had a rough enough surface to file the plaster flat. It took a while and I had to clean the brick a couple of times, but it did the job. One last piece of plaster I removed was the right leg. I used a small hacksaw to cut it off. The model did not need all three legs, and I thought the architecture might benefit from some asymmetry. Now it is time to add details. I traced and cut a paperboard circle for the round doorway. Once I was sure it was the right diameter, I sliced off the part below the model and trisected the door into 3 segments. Ooh, trisect. Ooh, fancy word. Don't mind if I do take these 5 points for vocabulary. I need every point I can get. Merriam-Webster better have a gift shop I can redeem these at. I attached the door sections with PVA glue. Plaster is porous, which is good for water-based glues and paints. I also glued a rectangular piece over the sawed-off leg of the structure. This will be an electrical box of some sort. Maybe it's a control panel for the house, or a breaker box, or maybe a generator? I don't know, but it'll look interesting. I decorated it with thinner strips of paperboard paneling and used some hole punches to make tiny buttons. The rear leg of plaster had this vertical recess that would be perfect to slot in a flagpole or antenna. I hot glued some plastic bits I recovered from the trash onto a wooden skewer to form a pole. A plastic bead combined with a foam washer made for an angled satellite dish to rest on top of the pole. This piece looks suitably sci-fi. I superglued this pole into the cavity and added a few paperboard straps to resemble supports holding this towering tech in place. I used a piece of string to represent a thick cable running between the satellite antenna and the electrical box. The left leg of the structure looked a little empty after the satellite addition. I found another scrap piece of plastic in my collection that would look nice as a futuristic chimney. I plugged the horizontal hole with a piece of circular dowel and inserted another piece of dowel underneath. This added surface area for when I superglued it to the plaster. Now it is time to shift focus toward basing the model. I am once again using 3mm thick paperboard for the base. I cut out a rough outline of the model with a generous extra border space and then gave the edges a bevel. This is easier when done with a fresh, sharp blade. Once I had the base fully shaped, I marked the edges where I wanted the model to attach and then glued it down with PVA. While that dried, I crafted 3 futuristic crates from paperboard. I thought some manufactured objects would look good outside the building. I also added some paperboard tiling outside of the front door. The ground needed some texture, I mixed some grout with water and began carefully spreading the paste over the open ground. In the past, I have painted glue on bases and sprinkled sand and grout over the top. I've also done the reverse, and I've done both on the same model. Whatever way you do it, you're gonna get some texture on the model. However, it does seem like more water means smoother grout, which may not be ideal if you want coarse ground texture. This time I went with the paste because I wanted to be able to shape and mold the ground cover and texturing so that it looks like the dirt and sand is sloping up towards the edges of the house, like it's built up over time. While the grout was drying, I glued some chipped pebbles here and there as small rocks. Now it is time to paint. Earlier, I primed the plastic components of the build, but I am skipping the rest of the model. Why? This is a large model, and a lot of the other materials take paint very well, so might as well save myself some primer and skip ahead to the base coats for those parts. This structure is already looking like one of those houses from Tatooine. It was at this point that I decided to steer toward that color scheme. I gave the plaster structure a base coat of cream-colored paint. I wanted the ground to be a little warmer, so I took the cream and added some tangerine.
Tangerine and cream? That sounds delicious.
Oh, little Timmy, it isn't. It's all acrylic. You really shouldn't be eating paint. Not until you finish your yogurt container of plaster. Just a little short PSA. Don't eat plaster, don't eat paint. I wanted the ground to be a little warmer, so I took the cream and added some tangerine, and then added some gray to desaturate it a little bit. Next, I gave the entire structure a coat of white. I wanted a little more contrast between the building and the sand. The satellite pole, chimney, electrical box, and crates were painted light gray. The plastic pieces took 2 or 3 coats to get full coverage. I chose a dark gunmetal for the door and satellite dish. This will help them stand out from the building. I gave the crates and electrical box a messy dusting of metallic paint to represent scuff marks where the metal has been scratched bare. I came up with a palette of 3 earthy colors for the desert rocks littering the base. I mixed a dull brick, a warm yellow, and a light brown. I randomly applied these colors to the rocks. The electrical box's buttons are an excuse to paint some colorful details here. However, at the last moment, I decided to tone it down and paint these small buttons black and 2 of the 3 big buttons white. The last button was painted red because, you gotta have a big red button. The cable running between the antenna and the control panel was painted black. The paint job is nearing completion. Now it is time for washes. I used a sepia wash on the structure itself and a watered down brown over the entire model. I don't know why I keep shifting between warm colors and bright white for the house. Maybe it's just me trying to dial in the color to get it just right. I made sure to get extra wash in the cracks of the door and floor tiles out in front of the building. Darkening those gaps will emphasize that these features are made from multiple separate pieces. The last step is dry brushing. The house itself got a white dry brush. This toned down the stains from the washes while giving the walls a dusty, chalky surface. I also dusted the rest of the model with white, but later returned with cream because the white was too much. I wasn't shy about getting the tiles in front of the door as well as the lower parts of the crates dusty. I imagine sand and dirt gets kicked up as people walk in and out of the building, and the crates must surely get pushed around and dragged through the dirt and sand now and then. With the model suitably caked in a dusting of color, this piece of miniature terrain is complete. It looks like one of the houses one would see sparsely scattered about the deserts of Tatooine. This model would be perfect for Star Wars Legion, but it is also suitable for other sci-fi miniature gaming. A few more of these houses and I could have a small village or outpost to battle over in a miniature wargame. On its own, I think this lone structure will be better suited to the smaller scale of futuristic role-playing games. It could be a remote dwelling of a non-player character the party is seeking, or maybe the hideout of a pirate captain. Perhaps this place is abandoned and the group stays the night seeking shelter from the harsh desert storms that frequently choke out the sun. I really like this model. The dark colors of the added tech features draw attention to them when juxtaposed with the bright and bare walls of the building. These parts, like the satellite dish and electrical box, stand out as if they were installed out of necessity rather than aesthetics. It feels a bit lived in and cobbled together. One little touch that I did not mention earlier is how the tiles outside the front door abruptly transition to a chaotic spread at the edge of the base. I like this because it hints at how quickly the manufactured order of this place gets swallowed up by the outside world. The plaster structure itself is not perfect either, and I like that. The air pocket or scratch on the top front adds some character, and the chips missing from over the doorway make me think that whoever lives here has accidentally banged something on the ceiling more than once while going in and out of the dwelling. You know, now that I think of it, this model is kind of like a futuristic hobbit hole. It's very short, and it's got that round door. You know, it kind of looks like a wheel of cheese with a white wax coating.
Cheese must put it on cracker.
No, it's not cheese. It's a model.
But it looks like cheese.
But it has a satellite dish sticking out of it. Oh yeah.
Unless it's future cheese. Antennas and satellite dishes are the future of cheese. No!
I'm convinced that I could have made the electrical box more interesting. Maybe I could have given it a small black screen or changed up the button layout. One thing I certainly would do differently is the colors of the big buttons. A big red button is cool, but as soon as I put the wash on it, it looked like a piece of pepperoni. Not cool. Oh no, now there's pepperoni on the cheese wheel. It's turning into a pizza. Molded pulp and expanded polystyrene packaging have weird shapes. They can be a little too much, but that's what makes them great for sci-fi buildings. The genre is laden with cultures and as a result architecture styles that should feel alien to us. I have more of this packaging, so I could make additional pieces in the future, but I think for now, one lone bone-dry house is enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you did not, then tell me why. Now it is time for me to retire to that dusty desert domicile in that sweltering sea of sand. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep making and keep playing. Have a good one. I cannot wait to see the next Borge Snukas movie, Space Feuds, Episode 5, The Chowder Night Snacks. Oh, little Timmy, you've eaten all that paint, but you've hardly touched your yogurt container of plaster. Tisk, tisk, tisk. My favorite flavor, gypsum.